Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be continuing our discussion of The Last of Us, but we also have a few things to look forward to on the horizon. And so let's jump right into that segment on the horizon. On the horizon is, of course, where we look forward to stuff coming up in the next week or so. For this week, on Tuesday, January 31st on Netflix, Cunk on Earth hits. I've sent you a bunch of Cunk clips before.
Yes, yeah. Very funny.
Yeah, very, very funny. It kind of like we'll take a look at history or something, but like through the perspective of a complete idiot.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Funny. Then on Wednesday, February 1st, The Ark comes to SyFy. This is from Dean Devlin, one of the creators of Independence Day. And it's about a crew that's adrift in space during an intergalactic colonization mission. So something goes wrong on their ship that's transporting them, and they all get woken up and realize that something's wrong and they have to try to survive. That's coming to SyFy Wednesday, February 1st. Freeridge is coming on Thursday, February 2nd to Netflix. This is a spin-off of their series On the Block. Dear Edward is coming to Apple TV Plus on Friday, February 3rd. This is about a plane crash where there's an 11-year-old survivor, and that's the only survivor on the plane crash, including the child's family. Mm-hmm. So it's like a drama story about that. At least that's what it seems to be. I don't think it's like some kind of a mystery or a thriller or something. It's just a drama.
The child doesn't end up on a mysterious island.
Yeah, ends up on a mysterious island. There's like polar bears. Yeah, great time. But Knock at the Cabin is on Friday, February 3rd in theaters.
That looks good.
That's from M. Night Shyamalan, Ding Dong. And stars Dave Bautista.
Yeah, Bautista, yeah.
So yeah, that one looks kind of interesting. And that's it for our On the Horizon segment. And now we're going to move on to our final segment of the show, full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we are continuing our discussion of The Last of Us by talking about Season 1, Episode 2, The Infected. This one was directed by Neil Druckmann, the creator of the game. And of course, the entire series is done by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann as the showrunner.
Yes.
So what's interesting in this episode is that last episode we got kind of like 3 different time periods that we got like sequentially, like no like flashbacks. Right. And then here we start off again in 2003 at the beginning of the infection. Another scene that I do not believe is in the games as well, because the games are completely focused on the characters. So you don't really see anything that they're not involved in. This takes place in Jakarta, Indonesia, and shows a mycologist being taken by the government, scared kind of that she's like in some kind of trouble or something. But it turns out they're bringing her in because they need an expert to see what's happening to people. Another thing that's interesting here is, have you heard about the flower theory that's been going on online?
Yeah, I heard about that.
This kind of is like just more evidence for that, I guess. So whether coincidence or not, it's just kind of more leads into that direction, because they said that the body that they found that had the bite wound and the cordyceps in it was from a flower factory or like a flour mill.
So I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. So the scene is very well acted, very well written, very well shot. The quality was super high, but it's superfluous. Do we really need to know the origin? Do we really need to have a fan theory about like Flower confirmed? Do we need to like have all this set up for that? It's like it doesn't matter to the narrative one iota. It's not like when Night of the Living Dead, George Romero wasn't concerned about what created the zombies. There's like some throwaway dialogue on newscast about a comet, but he doesn't stop the movie to have some scientists go, yes, it was this comet.
I think this comes from a format.
Yeah.
I think this show has a format. I think this is what we're going to be seeing throughout the entire show, is that we're going to be having an opening scene that takes place either at the beginning of the breakout or something else that's supposed to give us some piece of information. And it's probably going to have to do with characters we're going to meet. So like maybe in the next episode, I think Nick Offerman's supposed to be in the next episode, his character.
Yes.
So maybe we'll get something like that. Like it'll show him in 2003 or maybe later at some point, or something like that kind of shows a little bit of his backstory. Then we'll jump into the episode. And the problem with this episode is there was just only really the 3 characters for the whole episode. So they had to do kind of another external
I see. Right.
Story in order to hold the format.
In order to hold, like a format type thing. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it would work better as we introduce new characters if we did get to see meet those characters like before the outbreak. That would be nice because that gets you in our dimension of those characters. It just doesn't work here because we're never seeing these characters again. That was it. It's much like the first episode. You're never seeing those people again. But that
it's
helps.
The opening concept at least.
But it explains like the concept of the show to the viewer at least. This one's kind of like just there to confirm an origin for the outbreak, but in these stories, like the origin is completely superfluous. Like it doesn't matter. Like if you told Joel and Ellie, like, oh, it's the flower that caused it, they'd be like, great, what are we supposed to do with that information?
I think this is their flashback format. So rather than have flashbacks during the episode, like say Lost does, they're going to do like a flashback sequence at the beginning of every episode. I think that's kind of the format of the show. And we only have 3 characters that we're following in this episode. And I think that limits them. And it comes down to, we just had the big revelation about his past thing with Joel in the last episode. We already had that. And then you have Ellie, and I think anything that they're going to show from her is going to be later on because it's going to be more of a revelation, and they don't want to do that yet. And so all that leaves is Tess, and I think if they did one for Tess at the beginning, everybody would know she was short for this world. It would be like an obvious, an
obvious tell that like the whole like trope where like we start hyper focusing on a character right before they're supposed to die.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it was going to be. Like it was like they probably were thinking about doing Tess, and then when they wrote it, I bet they probably thought they were going to do it with Tess. They wrote something for it, and then they said, "Wow, this makes it super obvious. We need to do something else." And so then they rewrote a different scene with just this mycologist in Indonesia. Which I guess if you just want to really stick to a format, like really concretely stick to a format, like if that's so important to you, then it makes sense that they did it this way. I think that they could have broken from the format, or they could have done something else that would have been interesting as well. But I don't know. I think the only other really character they could have probably focused on would have been Tess. And I think that maybe that was something that they were looking into and decided against.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I do think that explanation is probably the most correct explanation. It doesn't bother me too much. It was just something like
it just didn't feel necessary. Yeah.
It's not like it ruined the episode or anything for me, or like I especially hate it. It's just I wanted to jump back into like what Joel and Ellie were doing after the end of the episode, So
yeah, I mean, this also could have been to try to like nail down the whole idea of how the contagion spread, since they did make a change, and so maybe they wanted to really put a focus on the bite, as like the means of how this spreads.
Yeah, they might have like wanted to point that out a little more concretely.
Yeah. I wasn't too much a fan of that either, the sequence. I will also say that, I don't know, there's certain things about the show that just bother me. Some of it, I think some of it just comes...
List your gripes. Give me all your gripes.
As I said last week, some of this is probably just fatigue from, having seen so many zombie and post-apocalyptic shows, so there's just fatigue. But another thing is, when you try to make a push to make things seem really realistic and plausible, and then you have like a really fantastical element, it kind of like takes away from it, We know, for example, from the last episode and from like, I've already watched like nature documentaries that have talked about this kind of thing, that this kind of fungus does exist. It doesn't go after humans, but it does exist. But the idea that it would target humans is kind of ridiculous because we're like a harder target to control because of our brain centers versus say like an ant that's already like a hive mind creature.
Well, like there's a reason it only targets insects, and it's because insects obviously have much smaller, much simpler like brains, and it's not like this huge complex organ.
Yeah, I mean, even more so than just having a small brain, I think it has to do with like the hive mind aspect, because ants have a hive mind, so they kind of take commands.
Well,
like, they get sent commands. It's not just ants. There's different species that specialize. Like there's one species that specializes in caterpillars. So it's not. I don't necessarily think hive mind aspect has much to do with it. But anyways, it's like it's thriving. It is like also like hyper focused. So like it would be a different species for a different species of ant. Like it doesn't cross to different. Like there could be two different species of ant, and the fungus could affect one, but it wouldn't be able to affect the other.
So theoretically, this would be like a new species of that fungus.
You think it would work its way up? If it ever made its way to humans, it would have worked its way up through, primates or something in some way. Like it would have found its way into mammals, worked its way up.
The idea of like something like this jumping straight from insects to humans is really far-fetched.
I mean, it makes more sense because they took away the spore thing and made it the biting. But if they hadn't have done that, the most logical way for a organism to thrive in like a hotter kind of climate that it can normally deal with would be to infect insects that are like flying, like say mosquitoes or something, or flies, house flies, and then they could spread the spores in the air. It's like there's lots of things like that where I just think like because they put such a focus on trying to make it realistic, it makes me have more scrutiny about what they're showing.
It's just a little nicer than like magic moon fairy dust or whatever. It also it allows to make their version of zombies more unique. They have like a more unique fungus inspired appearance, so it doesn't look like the same monsters that you see. So Last of Us zombies don't look like Romero zombies, but it does require you to suspend your disbelief. Like all fiction of this type does.
But that's the exact problem, though, is because it's trying to, like, really go gritty and realistic, it's not as easy to suspend, like the disbelief.
I find
because it's so gritty and realistic, I need to, like, focus in on the details. And when you focus in on the details, it falls apart.
Well, if you focus in the details, zombies will never exist, fungus-based or not. So, like...
Yeah. Like, the most realistic zombie apocalypse would probably be something like 28 Days Later, where they're not literally undead or something, but they're just... It's like a rage virus, it's like rabies.
Right,
and that's like the most realistic, I guess, portrayal. And even that is, like, ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get that. I'm just trying to say that, like, because, like, if a show handles things in a way that isn't so down and so gritty and so, like, in the details, it's easier to suspend disbelief because your mindset is, oh, this is just like a fun show or something. And so it's easy to suspend belief. But when the show, like, tries to ask you questions and takes itself seriously and goes like, okay, well, you need to pay attention to what this character is doing at this point because this relates to something else. You need to focus in on that. When a show asks you to do that, it's asking you to scrutinize its own content, and then it becomes hard to suspend disbelief. Like,
I don't know. I'm not really having an issue with that.
I'm having more and more of an issue. Like the first episode, I had a little bit of it, and the second episode, I've had a lot more.
Speaking of these zombies, we finally get to see the clickers in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And some really, like, tense scenes.
I have to ask you again, have we hit any new ground yet? Because I know they've changed things, but have we hit, like, new ground from where you were playing?
Not so far. My memory's not that great. I hope you don't
but,
ask
like,
me
the key
this every
events you
episode.
already knew about,
Yeah.
Yeah. This is full spoilers, but
Oh yeah, this is full
you knew
spoilers.
Tess was dying already.
Yes, yeah.
It was obvious to me just because she wasn't in any of the promotional material.
It's not Joel, Ellie, and Tess. It's Joel and Ellie. So like,
even like the opening credits have like the part at the very end where, because the opening credits are kind of cool. They do like this whole like a city kind of cityscape, but it's all like fungus. And then at the very end, it shows like 2 fungus sprouts up, and it's supposed to be Joel and Ellie. And I'm like, well, obviously Tess isn't there, so
yeah,
that can only really mean one thing, you know?
She has a great send off, though. They give her a very heroic exit from the show, where they're about to be swarmed by a bunch of clickers. And another interesting thing about this too, and because of the way they designed their zombies, they have it so like they're connected, and stepping on like a fungal branch or something can like attract them all to your location, which makes the threat like even worse.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like they're wirelessly, I guess is the best way I could say, connected. Like it literally, there was a sprout on like one of the clickers, like fingers that they shot, and it touched another sprout in the ground. And so it's like a wired connection. Like they really clearly showed that like the reason the clickers got up wasn't because like they were walking around and suddenly jerked their heads like, oh, there's something over there. But it was like they were on the ground, like touching the fungus that was going through the earth, you know?
Yes.
And that's how it spread to them. So that's kind of like an interesting little part of the rules of this world that we're learning now, is not just that they can connect through like these fungal lines, but that they have to connect through the fungal lines. They can't like just wirelessly interface, is the best way I can say it, I guess.
One of the interesting things is like they seem to have removed the sections where you're fighting humans. Like there's several sections in the game where you get into shootouts with human opponents. And one of those was when they arrive at the Firefly base.
Yeah, here we see, like in the last episode, this is something that already happened.
Yeah.
Before our characters reached the spot.
So they reach the Firefly base, and you find the dead fireflies, and in the game it cuts to a sequence where you're assaulted by human assailants, and you gotta fight them off, and then like the rest of the stuff happens. But in here, like that doesn't happen. In fact, that hasn't happened at all. That seems to be a very deliberate choice by the showrunners.
Yeah, the only scene we've had of that, besides like having something happen before, like off camera, besides that, the only time we've had any kind of confrontation like that was the one guard that they killed in the last episode. That was like the only like encounter with another person where they had to face off another person. And it was like a one-on-one. It wasn't like a chase from a force or something. So yeah, like I think that's also intentional. I don't think that's a permanent thing. Like I don't think they're gonna downplay, humans are also bad. That's a very tropey thing, by the way, for like post-apocalyptic stuff of like the virus is bad, the zombies are bad.
Oh yeah,
people are
the
worse.
The tropey thing is people are the real monsters.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they're going to move away from that trope. I think they're delaying. No. I think they're delaying the trope.
This leans into it pretty good. This leans into that trope pretty hard, actually.
Yeah,
at least the games do.
I'm just saying, like, I think in the show they're just delaying that trope. They're not changing it. They're just delaying it. Like, I think we're going to have more of that stuff, but I think they want to give us some time to, like, learn to care about the characters and become attached to the characters. And I think that they probably feel that if they start showing them just like murdering a bunch of people, that it's going to like hurt their chances of achieving that,
Yeah, it's like the Uncharted thing, the other Naughty Dog thing, where like, oh, Drake's supposed to be like a heroic, dashing thief, yet in between like things he murders like 100 people every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of they're putting it off. Like they're putting the focus on the cordyceps for now, so that we have a chance, so that it's survival situation. Like, and then once they move past that then you're going to start seeing more like humans come into play, and then humans will be the real monster.
Yes.
I think that's kind of where they're going with it. It is interesting in this episode what they did with Tessa's character, because when it starts, when it starts in 2023, I should say. It starts with Ellie waking up and Joel and Tess are just like staring at her. And there's a very clear change in Tess where like now that Tess is like seeing Ellie as the potential cure, her kind of like worldview's kind of changed, you know? And that hasn't really affected Joel yet. Like Joel still kind of is like, we should probably just kill her, you know? Like she's dangerous. At any moment she could turn, we should kill her. And Tess is like this could be the change. This could be a thing. And when she dies, it's like, it's bolstered by that perception that she has now of like, Joel, take her, get her out of here. She might be our hope, you know? She might be the hope. I don't mind dying for that hope kind of thing, you know? And that's like a big change in her character where she was much more like Joel in the last episode, just kind of cold and detached.
Another thing, like, another big change from the game, though, is in that sequence there, because they changed the method of infection. In the game, that place is filled with spores, and they got the gas mask on. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens in the skirmish with the clickers, Ellie's gas mask comes off. And so she's inhaling a bunch of spores, but it doesn't infect her, it doesn't change her. And that's the proof to Joel that Ellie is the real deal.
Where in here we see she got bit again.
Yeah, here she has to get bit again for it to be the proof, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely that's an effect of a change you make. So when you make a change to the source material for your adaptation, it causes a chain reaction, you know?
Yeah.
Because you have to make other changes to make things make sense. So you had the scene where Joel comes to realize that this is an actual truth, and you have to present that in a different way now.
Yes.
So yeah, be interesting to see how things change even further from there as more dominoes come into play.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not gonna know really that well because I haven't played the games, but it's gonna be interesting to see where it goes with that, based on people's perceptions online and stuff, I guess. So what did you think of this episode as a whole?
I thought it was
as a follow-up to the last episode too.
I thought it was great. We got the clickers for the first time, and we got some very intense scenes featuring the two big set pieces with the clickers. They were both very intense scenes. The acting, again, from everybody was top-notch. Everybody kills it. Not just Pedro Pascal, who is great. Not enough good things in the world to say about him, but everybody was fantastic.
Anna Torv and Bella
Ramsey.
Good performances all around. The opening sequence had great performances, too.
Yes, it did. And then, just the way they handled killing off Tess, I thought was really well done. It's funny because, it's going to happen, but it's one of those things where you're kind of disappointed it happened or they didn't change the adaptation a little way. But the way she goes out is great because she blows them all up. And now we're earnestly on the road to The Last of Us.
She got to make out with somebody first, though. So.
God, that was so gross. I was like... That was one of the grossest things I've seen on TV all week, so...
I have to say, besides the other complaints I said in this episode about the whole suspending disbelief thing, it's just so tropey. That's my one big issue with this show. My biggest issue.
It's just so well done that it doesn't bother me here.
Yeah.
You know why everybody doesn't have horrible quippy dialogue and trying to be funny every 5 minutes. That's what I like.
That's not too different from The Walking Dead.
yeah, I know. Seems to be so prevalent in pop culture right now.
I'll say the one thing is at least it's paced a bit faster than say The Walking Dead.
Yes, it is.
So things are moving along at a bigger clip, they're not we're in the city, so we're going to be here all season. It's they're in and out of the city. This to me
feels like I'd rate this at the same level as the first season of The Walking Dead for me. Which I really enjoyed. No, I mean quality-wise, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. The problem is that Walking Dead already happened, and there's a lot of similarities here already. So, and I love Pedro Pascal. I think Bella Ramsey's a new talent. Anna Torv I've loved since she was in Fringe. She was great in that as well. It's just so tropey that it's I'm just hoping, I'm waiting for something different to happen. Something that kind of breaks the mold a little bit. And I'm hoping that we're going to get that sooner rather than later. I mean, we're meeting Nick Offerman's character in the next episode, so they're going to encounter somebody else. So maybe we'll see something different there.
Like I said, all the impressions I saw online say episode 3 is really, people are raving, the critics at least have been raving about it. So
Yeah. So let's hope. Let's hope for
Yeah.
something great in that in that third episode to continue on. That it's 9 episodes total in the series. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed
1/3 of the way through.
I enjoyed the
after
individual
next week.
aspects. I enjoyed the individual aspects of this episode. I enjoyed the set piece scenes. I thought when they were going through the museum, I thought that was creepy as hell. It really did kind of feel like a video game sequence or something where you enter into a set piece and you're kind of like, oh, I want to explore and I want to find some loot. But at the same time, you're like, oh, but I don't know if I should because something's going to attack me, you know?
Right,
That kind
yeah.
of feeling you get, like, it's very identifiable in, like, you know, the language of video games was, like, in play here as well, which was, I like that it carries over and works. But overall, I'm still waiting for a surprise. That's what I'm waiting for on this series. Something new and exciting.
And I hope it delivers on that.
Yeah. Well, that's it for this episode then. Next week, we're going to cover more of The Last of Us. We're going to talk about the third episode that we have a lot of high hopes for, and that will be next week's discussion. So stay tuned for that. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you open up the container stories for any of our on-screen podcast episodes, you will find a bunch of relevant links to like our SoundCloud page, our Facebook page, everything like that you need to keep in touch with us. So check all of that out. The best way to reach us is just on our Twitter accounts for now, but you can check out everything else there by going to one of the container stories. Thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the On-Screen Podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.